Hi, I'm Boni Montgomery. In this first section, we're going to show you how to get a good stamp image every time. We'll show you the importance of starting with clean stamps, and you'll also get a brief introduction to ink and pad types. We'll also show you some beautiful things done with rainbow ink pads. Here with me now is Vesta Abel of Commotion Stamps. Now, Vesta, you're not only a designer and an artist, but you've been stamping for 12 years, so I'm sure there's all kinds of things you can teach us today.
Yes, and I'm going to show you everything I know about rubber stamping, and we're going to start with the basics.
Okay, the first thing we need to do, what is it?
You always want to work on a smooth, flat surface. It's
right.
very important because I'm going to show you a little demonstration here of an uneven surface and what happens.
There's just a napkin under there.
See what happens if you don't have a smooth, flat surface, okay?
All right,
Look at
definitely
the
a difference, and
Okay,
that's
so
all we have to do.
It's critical to have a clean surface and a smooth surface when you're starting.
Okay, the next thing we need to
Okay.
do.
The next thing is you always want to have clean stamps when you start.
All right.
Okay, and if you were just using one color ink pad all the time, it wouldn't be so important. But there's such an array of colors that you're going to want to use, so you want to have a clean stamp every time. Now I'll show
What
you,
would happen?
well, I'll give you
yeah.
a little demonstration of what will happen here if you have a dirty stamp when you start. Okay, now we're putting black ink onto another color. If this had been a stamp that you had been using on another project and you didn't clean it and it still got black ink on it, you can see what would happen if you go to a different color pad. And not only will it ruin your ink pad, but you don't get a
black.
good and you
to
don't
be
get
pink.
a good true color.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's very important.
So we want to always clean our stamps off. And depending on what type of ink you use, then you're going to use different types of cleaners.
Okay, what types of inks are there?
Okay, there's dye-base inks, there's pigment inks, there's permanent inks, fabric ink, and the first two I mentioned are going to be cleaned with either water, or you can use glass cleaner, or you can use rubbing alcohol,
All right.
whatever
and those
you
were the
want.
dye base and,
Pigment inks.
okay, that we clean that way.
Right.
And you're going to
They're
show
very
us
easy cleanup.
specifically how we do this.
Right. And if you're using a permanent type of ink, then you need to use a solvent-based cleaner.
Okay. But
Which
you're
we're going
gonna-
to go into that later.
Okay, you're going to show us
But
how
for
we're going to
now,
clean our stamp here that
yes,
we've
you can just
have put
have
black
a
on.
paper towel on your work surface and just clean it off. You're just needing to clean the surface of this stamp.
Okay, just kind of dab and rub.
Right. So you don't have to scrub real hard or anything. You just want to get that surface ink off of there. And then you want to, now we're going to also go on to the different types of stamps that there are.
Okay, but basically this pad has been ruined for us because we've got the black on
as you
there.
can see, this side still is open, and you
But we
can
don't
use that. And you can try to get that off of there if you could, but you can see what happens.
Boy.
It really,
So it's very important to clean those
Very
stamps.
important.
Would we clean them after we have used them, or can we do we clean
it's
before we
generally a
use them
good
again?
idea, because then you don't have to worry the next time if you're getting all your stamps out and your ink pads out. What might happen is you forget whether or not you cleaned it,
Right.
and then you go and you stamp it on there and you've ruined the pad. You don't want to do that.
All right, well, let's get a
So,
clean pad out then to work
okay.
with. And you're going to show us next what we need to know about inking.
There are a lot of different types of inks and stamps, but
Okay.
anyway, as you're looking at these stamps here, you can see that this surface has a solid design. It's totally filled in. This butterfly over here is basically line drawing,
Okay.
so it's open. So it requires a different amount of ink when you're inking it. Now
Okay.
this one, that needs a lot of ink, it has to cover a lot of surface. You want to make sure that your stamp is getting lots of ink on it.
So you're basically just
So
dab,
we're just
dab,
going,
dab, dabbing.
Yes, because if you just lightly ink that, just say you use real light pressure and you're not getting very much ink on it, and you stamp it, see what can happen. Where if you go back, get a lot of ink on it, and use firm pressure,
Oh, that's nice.
look
Yeah.
at the difference.
Okay,
You know.
all right.
Okay, now
And
that's,
when we use our line,
then you don't need quite as much pressure and not as much ink, because you don't have as much surface that's picking up ink.
okay.
But you still want to go straight down when you stamp. You don't want to rock back and forth to get a smooth, clean image. And, okay, these are just our regular size stamps like that. Now, the same things apply to little tiny stamps like these mini ones here. There again, we have 2 stars here. One is a solid surface on there, and the other's a line drawing. Same thing, you want to get plenty of ink on there, go straight down with it,
Okay.
and you can see what happens
A little less
there.
pressure when the stamp is smaller.
A little less.
More pressure.
This is another tip to remember all the time. Have scrap paper right there. You've got your nice stationery that you're going to make cards on, but you want to take your scrap paper and get the feel of each stamp before you start working with it. Well, this needs a little less, or this needs a little more.
Okay.
And when it looks perfect on the scrap paper, you're ready to make a card.
All right.
Okay?
So more pressure when we have solid
Right. And more
image.
ink. And more ink.
More ink, and less pressure when we have an outline or smaller.
Exactly.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Okay.
All right, you're going to show us
and
this
also with a line drawing stamp like this, well, you don't want to rock any stamps, but you can see what happens if you don't, if you're too
one. You get a double
jerky with
image.
it, yes.
Yeah, so it's straight
So,
down.
do that.
I'm going to use this one. This because I love
Okay.
this little paw stamp. And I would have a tendency just to push down once, go on the paper.
Right.
And yeah, I've got
And
it's kind of all over the place
Right.
there. So I want to dab, dab, dab.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to put it this way. Can I use too much ink?
Not unless the ink pad has been over-inked.
Okay.
And if it's just one that you've bought in a store, in most cases they're not.
Okay, and I'm not rocking, I'm pushing straight down.
Right.
And dun-da-da.
Great.
Now, this is a felt pad, correct? Are
Right.
there different types of pads?
Yes, there are. Even in the dye-base ink, sometimes you'll find them on a foam pad.
Okay.
And there again, they take a different pressure as you're using them. That's why you need to practice on paper first. See how
Okay.
your inks work and how it's working with your stamp.
All right, here I am. I'm just going to keep trying a little bit. All right, you have
Great.
another image there, and
Very
you can
good.
see that he's going across the whole page.
Perfect.
All right, now this was something different.
Yes, now this design here, as you can see, has more design up at the top, and it narrows down to a little fine point. So as you're stamping that, and you're getting, this is also a line drawing, so it doesn't need as much ink. Then, when you go to stamp it like this will probably still turn out well. But what can sometimes happen is that if you press too hard like that down at that end, you could get a smeared image down at where the line is delicate like that. So you want to just be careful. Make sure you're stamping. Look at every stamp and kind of figure out what kind of pressure you need.
Because there's more design at the top of this iris, you would want to put more
A little
pressure
more pressure
there,
at that end if
and
possible.
then relax
Right.
a little as you go down
Exactly.
to the smaller one. Again, it sounds like we have to remember to practice, practice, practice
Right, right.
on another sheet beforehand.
It
and see
sounds
what we
like
can
we're
get.
going through a lot right now, but all of this will just be natural as you're doing your stamping. And the whole idea of making sure you go over all these details like this is then you're going to have beautiful cards. You're not going to waste a lot of stationery. And doing a little pre-planning and have beautiful cards to show
Okay.
for it.
Now you have a jumbo stamp over there. I want to make
Right.
sure that we take a
Now,
look at this.
remember we were talking about getting plenty of ink and using lots of pressure. Well, when you're using a jumbo stamp, you're going to have to even rub it all over the pad like this to make sure it gets plenty of ink on it. You might even want to press the top of it like that. And then when you stamp it, see how you want to press.
Get all of the edges in there and
Right.
for the whole image.
And the whole thing turns
Okay.
out perfect. If you don't, and you think you're getting it inked all over, you're not, because it's so big and there's different levels in your pad. So by going like this, you're assured of getting ink all over the entire surface,
Okay.
as you can see how that is.
Well, we'll keep that in mind then.
And the jumbo stamps especially need a terrific amount of pressure compared to
Okay.
these little stamps.
All right. Well, right. So these are basically the basics, Vesta, that we want to keep in mind.
Right.
And then as we keep continuing to do more complicated things with our stamping, we'll always have that nice base of knowing the
right.
basics. So these inking and stamping tips will apply to all the stamping you do, whether on paper or wood or fabric, plastic, or whatever. So let's recap. The basic stamping techniques. Work on a smooth, hard surface. Second, start with a clean stamp for true colors and clean pads. We saw what could happen if you don't. 3, tap several times on the pad of ink. Now, let's look at the inking pressure. Remember, felt pads, heavier pressure, foam pads, lighter pressure, old pads heavier, new pads lighter. Stamp straight down with steady, firm pressure. Remember, don't rock or twist your stamp. Now let's look at the stamping pressure one more time. Large stamp, remember, heavier pressure. Small stamp, lighter pressure. Solid design heavier, open design lighter. Every stamp is unique, so practice, practice, practice on a scrap of paper to discover how much pressure you need and where. Okay, now we need to talk about the different kinds of ink that you mentioned, two specifically.
Right.
The dye base ink
and pigment inks.
Okay.
And it used to be really easy when you went out to get ink pads because there was only one type and it wasn't confusing like it might be now.
And we had red and we had black.
Right. Very
was about
simple. And now, since decorative stamping has become so popular, there's all kinds of specialty inks out there. And we're going to try to clear up some of the misconceptions about the different types of inks so that you understand what you're using. Okay, with dye-base inks, these are the most common ink pads that are out there available on the market still. Some of the advantages of them are they're inexpensive, they're quick drying, they're easy to find, they're easy to use and clean, so they're good for children, for instance.
Right.
And you clean up with either water or window cleaner or rubbing alcohol.
Okay. And we've been using the dye base so far.
Right.
That was the pad that we were using. So we'll just see how easy this is and how quickly it dries. Now some things we don't want the ink to dry quickly.
Right.
So
Which
we wouldn't
will
use the dye base.
That's right.
But if we wanted to, oh well, I didn't do I
Right.
should learn my basics
Learn
again
your
here.
basics.
Okay, I remember what I did. I have to tap, 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 get
Right.
enough ink and push
good
it
pressure.
down. Okay, see how important those
Yes.
basics are?
See?
Okay, anyway, we're showing that it will
Perfect.
dry quickly.
Right.
That's what makes it good for the kids.
Right.
What are some of the things that are drawbacks for dye base?
They fade more
Okay.
quickly. They don't fade right away, but let's say you make a birthday card or something, it's fine for that, or something that's not going to be exposed to strong sunlight, or
Right.
they can even fade in
Just regular
lighting
Okay.
too, so that's one of
Yeah,
the...
and that's already dry.
Right.
Now, if we
right.
have a dry base ink, when we're going to the store, how do we know to choose dry base? I mean, how can
Most
we tell?
of them don't actually say on the top of the pad. In that case, you're more apt to find that it is the dye-base ink.
Because it's more common,
Yes,
they just don't put it down.
They just don't put that
lot of
down on
times.
there. It's
Okay.
if you're going to get a specialty ink like the pigment ink or permanent ink or fabric ink, it will say that on the package.
All right. Now,
So-
you had told us before that we can actually re-ink our pads.
Right, and you can buy bottles like this and match up the color. And you want to stick to, if you're using dye-base inks, you want to make sure you're getting dye-base ink refill.
Okay.
Because if you try to mix different types of inks in one pad, say you get a hot pink that's in a pigment ink and think you can use it on your dye base, you'll ruin the pad.
Okay, so we want to
it's
keep
very
that in
important
mind.
to
All right.
get the proper inks.
Tell us about pigment inks then.
Pigment inks they have a lot of advantages. The colors that you see, for instance, on here are what you get.
Okay.
You can, if they're on a clear top like this, you can see the color. They don't fade in strong sunlight, or some of the other, they're slow drying, which we haven't gotten to that yet with embossing, but they're wonderful for doing that. The colors don't bleed in the pad. You can see these colors are right next to each other and they don't bleed together.
And do we clean up the same way?
You use the same cleanup method. You can
Okay.
either use water or a glass cleaner or rubbing alcohol to clean them with. They're very slow drying, so they will smear if you stamp them and then immediately try to touch it. It will
So
smear.
if, let's say, we were doing cards, we would want the dye base ink, because
If
that would go
that's
quickly.
all you're going to do.
Right.
Right.
Because we want it to dry quickly as we're going through a bunch of cards,
Right.
but maybe we're doing something more fancy or doing some of the things that we'll be showing a little later in the tape, and that's when we want to use this
Yes.
pigment ink.
And also, these won't dry in the pad.
Okay.
They last much longer.
Once again, do
And
we want to refill the
you
pigment
can,
pad with pigment ink?
after you've used them hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, they will need ink after a
Okay.
while. Another tip to remember too on the pads is to store them upside down so your inks flow to the surface.
Okay.
And they last quite a while.
All
in
right,
that
so we
way.
have dye-base ink and we have pigment ink.
Right.
All right, let's go through some of the basic things that we want to remember about those two different kinds of ink. First of all, we have the dye base. It's inexpensive, it's the most common and easy to find. It's quick drying, it's good for the kids, it won't smear. It's easy to use and it's easy to clean up. And also the colors will bleed in multicolored pads, so you want to keep that in mind. The colors fade over time, they're not light fast. And remember, refill only with dye-base ink. Now, the pigment inks. They're slower drying, but they're great for embossing. We're going to show you that later. The colors won't fade. The colors will stamp just as they appear in the pad. The colors will not bleed in multicolored pads. They have a longer shelf life than dye inks, and they can be used on fabric if embossed with clear powder. And remember to refill only with pigment inks. Vesta, now tell me about the rainbow pads.
Okay. Now, see, now here's a pad that has 3 different colors in it.
Okay.
Okay. And we're going to kind of stamp right between the 2 of those.
Oh,
And see how you have a variegated look there?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
So that's a rainbow pad.
right.
Okay.
Now over here you can see examples of things that have been done with them on cards, stickers, and on bookmarks.
Okay. That rainbow look gives it such a dramatic
Right.
feel.
It gives
I like
a much more professional look to your cards.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so we need some tips now on how to make this work for us.
Okay. Now, if you're just stamping in one area like this, and you're going back and forth, you can stamp all day without cleaning your stamp. You can just keep going like that.
With the 2 colors.
Right.
Okay.
And see how you get the effect like that? But let's say now you want to go to this end and use that ink. You want to wash your stamp off.
Okay, for the red
Okay.
and purple.
Right. Now we can go down to this end.
And still dabbing like we learned at the
Exactly.
beginning.
And the reason we're doing that again is because we've got a solid stamp there that needs lots of ink.
Oh, I suppose that would, oh, that's nice.
how-
That's pretty. Yeah.
Right.
I suppose that would be different. We were talking in the beginning about the difference between the line drawing and
Exactly.
the drawings that are filled in.
You have so much more surface here to add ink onto.
Well, let's take a
So-
look at what this would look like if we did a
Okay.
butterfly with the line drawing. And I'm imagining we'll still see the colors,
Oh yes.
but they just won't be, as you said,
You don't need as much,
dramatic.
and also you don't need as much ink, and you don't need as much pressure.
Okay. We can still see it. It
See
is
how
pretty.
beautiful?
Right,
Yeah.
it is pretty, but you're right.
It stands out more with the solid.
Okay.
Okay.
That's easy
Now,
enough.
some other points to look at here too. Now let's do where we're doing the light and dark stamping with that all as well.
Light and dark.
See how not re-inking? And your colors
So we
on
can
there
use
too.
that to give us a fun effect if we want to. It's
Right.
another artistic thing that we can use with
Right.
the stamps. They don't always have to be nice and dark.
Right,
Only when we want
right,
them to be.
exactly.
Okay, now these come in all different kinds of colors.
Right.
Correct?
Here you can see this is a pad that you would buy in a store that's already got those colors in it like that. And there's different types of rainbow pads too. Some do come with the dye base, but these are pigment inks.
Okay.
that we're
Here
using
we have an example of we can
Right.
get all across here.
a lot of different colors on there.
Okay.
And you can either stamp between the two like this, or you can, a lot of these stamps will fit by going back and
just
forth like
using
that.
the one color.
And you get many different colors in the one pad.
Okay. Now I'm noticing one thing. We've been using these medium size and small ones.
Right.
What happens if we have our big guy right there?
What's wonderful about these ink pads too is you notice that this is sticking up on the pad. And most ink pads, it's down inside of it, like you can see
Here, we'll
here,
show
for
the
instance.
difference.
See how that's in there?
Oh, this is a rainbow also.
Right, and you can only use small stamps that would fit on the inside of that. In other words, you couldn't use a jumbo stamp on that. But because this is raised up in the pad like this, you can either lay it down like that and take your jumbo stamp and go across it
Oh.
and ink it that way, or you can also go like this and pick it up and
That looks easier.
Yeah.
I'd probably
Well,
do it
this
that
way you can
actually.
see that it's getting inked all over it.
Sure, and you can even see on the stamp, before
Right.
you even stamp it, that we have the
Right,
different colors.
that we got the different colors
Okay,
on there.
good.
And we'll even stamp that on there.
All right. Now, I want to also show something that you have out here that you're going to
Right.
have to tell me about. These are
Okay.
great. Look at this.
This is another thing that's wonderful about when you get the refills like this, and these come with a dry pad. Let's say you can see a big variety of these rainbow pads, but they don't have the colors you want.
Right.
What if you need to have colors that are for your school colors, or a design, a pattern in there that you want in there? You can make your own. So you can take a dry pad like this, pick out any color combination you want, and squeeze them right into the pad. And then you just dab back and forth. We'll put this color into there. And it'll just go down into
Just
there.
soaks it up.
Right.
And you can make your own.
And we'll put another color here. And see, they don't bleed together. So you can put them in there like that.
And specifically now, you are using which kind of ink?
This is the pigment ink.
Pigment ink.
Now you can also make a rainbow pad with the dye base inks, but you have to remember that they do bleed together in the pad.
All right, I want to
So-
use this just to show
Okay.
your beautiful combination
Back
here.
and forth with
Oh,
that.
that's right, we're still dabbing.
Right.
All right.
You may have a little bit too
We might
much
have a
ink
lot
on the
of
mo-
ink
yeah,
here, but
to
we'll
begin.
see. Oh.
No, it turned out beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And that's with a little tiny.
Now, if we
pad,
didn't
too.
dab when we have these rainbow colors and we just went down and straight over, would that
Right.
make a difference in our
It does.
image?
There again, do you remember when we were doing where I said if you just lightly touch it and you stamp
Uh-huh.
it had a faded look to it? Also, let's start with a completely clean stamp again. We'll make sure we
Okay.
clean that off real good. And let's say you just stamp like this.
Mm-hmm. And you didn't dab, you just
And you
stamped
didn't do
right down.
that. And also, with a clean stamp and a pad that's never been used before, you'll have a stark line between the colors. And
Okay.
it doesn't look really pretty. But what you want to do is you want to go back and forth slightly. It's okay for them to mix a little bit on there. And they're still not bleeding together. But what you're trying to achieve is a blended effect across there. You see that?
Sort of a shading from the
A
one tone
shading.
into the other.
So it's real important to go back and forth on it like that.
We can be very creative making
Right.
our own ink pads and then
And
just designing
there's
here.
like 36 different colors, so you can mix any combination together you want.
Okay.
You
Now,
might-
you were going to show us how we can
Yeah,
make
with-
our own with the
With the dye base inks.
dye base. We have been using
Okay.
pigment.
Now, since they do bleed together, you want to start with light colors first when you're putting them on the pad.
Okay.
And you would want to put mostly the light color because dark colors are going to bleed into the light and overtake it.
Okay, so light
So-
colors first.
Right. Let's say we're going to put 3 different colors on this pad. Okay, we're going to start with hot pink. See how that just soaks right into there? The dye base inks are very thin and almost like water. They just bleed right into there. So we're going to have most of the pad with this lightest color. And we're going to put purple.
So when we're putting these on, do we basically want to have a section of this color, a section
Right,
of this?
right.
Just as you're doing, we don't want to get fancy with our colors on the pad, making patterns or anything like
Oh,
that.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, because with this type of ink, it's not going to stay there. It's going to bleed around into it.
Okay.
Now, you can do that with the pigment ink.
Right, that's
As you
what I was
can
showing
see,
before.
we made squiggles there, and we'll stamp that to show you what it looks like.
Right, okay, so that's the
And-
pigment ink. We can do this fancy stuff.
Right.
Dye base, we want to stick
You
with
want to
just
pretty
the color.
much, pretty much.
Okay.
And then the last one, we'll put another color. And the reason we're making a jumbo pad like this is so that you can use your jumbo stamps with it. You can use small stamps on these pads, but you can't, the reverse is not true.
Right.
With
Can't
this
use-
jumbos on the small pads. So, now after a period of time, this is going to bleed into here. So then it's going to be about the same ratio.
I see.
So.
Okay. Well, that
And it's
looks
as
easy
simple
enough.
as that, and then you want to always re-ink with the same inks Never try to mix pigment inks onto your dye base
Okay.
pad or vice versa.
All right, just want to keep that
And there
separated.
you go.
All right, very good. We were going to show how to stamp with this one. I have to see what this
Right.
looks like. So I'm going to use my paw again. And I'm still dabbing, even though
Still
it's designed
dabbing,
like
exactly.
this. Dabbing. Can you tell this is my
And
favorite
back,
stamp?
and even lifting it up, and
Like this?
that's good. Yeah, I think that's your favorite stamp.
It is, obviously. All right,
Okay,
is that
that's
good? All right, my pressure down. Let's hope this works. Oh,
See how neat
okay.
that
Yeah, I
is?
see that it isn't necessarily just the one color to another. You
Right.
can almost see the squiggle in there. Well,
Right.
that's fun. All right, very good. We
Try the black and silver. You see?
Oh, all right. I'm going to let you
Now
do that
see,
one.
in this one now we have a metallic,
Can I use that? Oh, metallic.
a
Okay.
metallic ink mixed in with black.
Ooh. Yeah, that's fun.
Yeah, see how that has a real
Mhm. A different
metallic
kind of
look in there?
shading. Oh, well, this is
And
great.
you don't generally find those colors like that in a
Uh-huh.
pad. So now you can be as creative as you want to be.
All right, remembering to clean in between and
Always
remembering
clean.
to practice first.
Right.
Very
always
good.
practice.
Okay, Vesta. And that wraps up our discussion of ink pads and how to make good impressions. Now let's move on to the next section where we'll show you a couple of simple design tricks and introduce you to embossing powders, watercolor markers, glitter glue, and more. We'll make some beautiful cards and learn all about stamping on paper. In this section of the tape, we'll show you how to create note cards, gift tags, party favors, and a lot more. All right, Vista, we have a lot to get through, so let's
right.
get started with this one. What is this technique?
That's called light and dark stamping.
Okay.
And the way you achieve that is you take your stamp, ink it really well, and you stamp it once, then stamp it again, and you get a lighter image.
All right.
Okay?
Well, that's simple enough. All
See
right.
how you get
And
that
we have an
effect?
example of two different cards that you've done here. And that's just very simple.
Yeah, it's
to
very
just get
easy
some
to do,
shading.
and yet it gives you dimension to your cards.
Okay, so let's see then. The next thing we want to look at is this effect where we've got one shell that looks like it's in front of another one. What do we
Right,
call this?
and that's very easy to do. It's
What's this technique called?
that's called overlap stamping.
Okay.
Okay, and so that I can be real clear about that, I'll show you. Ordinarily, if you want to stamp an image like this, and you want to put another one behind it to make it look like there's a grouping,
Uh-huh.
see what happens there?
Right.
It gets muddy and
Yeah,
confusing
you can tell
looking.
here in the middle that it's two.
Right, you see the other one through it.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say you do this. You make a paper mask. You stamp your piece of pottery or your pottery on a piece of paper and cut it out with scissors. And
All
you
right.
want to cut right up to the design, carefully, right up to the
The
design.
edge.
Because what we're going to do now is you take your stamp, stamp it like that.
Okay.
And then you're going to lay your paper mask right over your first stamping. Then I'm going to go to the other end like this. And then you stamp halfway on the paper and halfway onto your background. Then when you pull that back,
Sure.
it appears to
we
be
can
behind it.
Really tell the difference. This looked
Right.
okay, but
Right.
this definitely looks
Right.
dimensional. So basically, this is called our mask.
Right.
And this
And you can go on again and lay it over this one, and we can stamp another one.
Well, let's
and you
do
can go
it.
on and on.
So we lay it down.
Right.
And we're going to cross
Clean
arms
that
it.
off.
Okay.
Right.
And
Okay.
that white piece that you've left on, that's basically
That's
just
to hold on
it.
to.
All
Right. Another little trick that you can use is
Oh.
to stamp it on like a Post-it note that has the sticky back onto it,
Mm-hmm.
and stamp it on there and cut it out like this, and then you don't have to hold it. You can lay
Oh,
it down here and it'll
mhm.
stay in place by itself.
Just the gummy part. That
Right.
looks great. You have an example of another mask that you cut
Right.
out here. I just want to show so people
Okay.
really get the idea
Right,
that
our
you
card
stamped
over
it,
there.
then you cut out
card.
part of it, and then you have this part merely
hold on.
to.
Right.
And as you were saying, here's the card where we can see,
It looks like a giraffe walking behind the elephant.
and then the elephant. So
Right.
obviously we can do this with different stamps. We don't have to
Right.
just do one stamp.
Exactly. And
but
like you
different
could
images.
just as easily have had this pottery here and put your mask down and stamp a teddy bear behind it. And
Well,
the
why
teddy
don't we
bear-
do this? Put the mask down there, and I'll put
something else.
parrot, maybe?
Okay.
I don't know. Why
All
not?
right.
A rabbit walking
Yeah,
next to it.
right.
So you have,
Okay.
where'd we put our
Our
oh,
little
there it is.
mask.
Okay.
All right, we'll lay that right over it.
I'm going to use a rabbit. I'm going to use this over here. Are we ready? This is fun. Okay, and just on the edge.
Right.
So we might be covering up his little face, but
Right.
we'll see what happens.
It's fun to experiment.
Uh-huh. There he is.
See how he's
That is
behind
fun. Once again,
Right.
experimenting on our piece of paper
Right,
before we go to our
right.
note card.
Exactly.
Okay, well that's
Another
fun.
thing to remember too is save these up. Get like a photo album or something,
Mm-hmm.
and it takes a little time to cut out some of these because they might have an intricate design.
Mm-hmm.
Save them up so that later when you're making cards and you need a mask, you just look through your photo album and they're already cut out.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to keep the stamp, you can keep the mask for
Right.
the same stamp.
Right, and
Okay,
use it over
very
and over
good.
again.
Now let's go to this beautiful, and I love the glitter. How do we get that?
Okay, that's glitter glue.
Glitter glue.
Right. Now, it comes in a lot of different colors. This particular one is clear. And if you're using that over something that you've stamped in the rainbow colors, see how it'll add a little sparkle to this? But it doesn't cover up the color underneath.
Here, do this one because
Okay.
it's so dark. I imagine that if you've got dark colors, this specifically this
Oh,
light
it's really pretty.
glitter
And you
will
can
really
put the
show.
glitter anywhere you want. It could be on the edge, it could be all over the design.
Here,
It
I have an
just
example of a
enhances.
stamp that you've made.
Right, and the
And-
entire thing. Now that was done with this, which you don't see through this glitter. This one you do. The
Okay, so this is
crystal-
green, and it will be green,
Right,
right?
everything will be green on that.
Well, we want to show another example of using that glitter glue that is so
And see,
pretty.
that's done on black, where it really stands out on that.
And once again, that is stamped first, and then this just enhances
And that
it.
just enhances it.
Okay, now here you have two cards. This is the one we looked at in the beginning.
Right,
And
with your light and dark stamping.
Light and dark stamping.
Right.
Now this is similar, but you
It's
can see
two
that
things.
the colors are different. Okay, what's the
Right.
difference?
Well, we did light and dark stamping still, but
Mm-hmm.
we also colored directly onto the stamp. Now you notice that here you've got blue on the flower, but you also have it on this leaf up here.
Mm-hmm.
On this one, you have green up here. So you're putting color exactly where you want it
Okay,
on
so-
here. We want only the flower to be blue and the rest of it to be green.
All right, so you're going to show us how we can be
So-
even more precise about
Exactly.
our stamping.
Okay, we start with a clean stamp.
Okay.
And these are called brush markers. They're very wet markers, which means you can take your time putting the color exactly where you want on the stamp, and we'll do that. Okay, see how you can, they're called brush markers because they have a real broad area on there that you can brush across the surface of this.
So just
See?
color it in. Boy, you could get
can do
very
that.
detailed that way.
And as many colors as you want. Okay, now for the,
Do these stay wet pretty long?
quite a while.
Okay.
It would depend upon your conditions too. If you were outside in the sunlight, they might dry faster. Okay, now when we stamp that, you can
Oh.
see the color is right exactly where you wanted it to be.
Okay.
Where our other rainbow effect, you can still get some interesting effects there, but you might have blue down into the stem.
So this
and
has much more
on.
control by using our
Exactly.
markers instead.
Exactly.
All right, now this one I love. What do we call this?
Those are called pop-ups.
Pop-ups, and we started
And-
out like this.
Yes, you start with, it's best to do this on heavy cardstock,
All right.
because if you want this little thing to be like for a name
Tag or
yeah, or something like that, and you want it to be able to stand up on a table, real weak paper that's very thin is just going to fall.
All right.
So we're starting with cardstock like this, heavy cardstock, and you take a ruler and find where the middle point is on here and mark it, then fold it, create a fold line like this. Then we're going to take our ink. Okay, make sure you stamp it right in the middle of the fold line like this.
Okay.
And we'll stamp another one below it, like that. Then, and this is important too, if you have some cardboard around or something like that, lay that down first, then take your piece of paper up there like that. And you want to take an X-Acto knife and cut only on the upper part of this design.
So
Anything that's above the fold line.
All right. Well, that's obviously an easy design to be able to cut out
Right,
of.
right.
Maybe for our first time we can use an easier
Right.
design. We have some examples of some of the other ones that you've done.
Okay. And then
Ah, there it is.
the top
Looks
will pop
great.
up. And that's why we call that the pop-ups.
As I said, that we have the bear
Right.
example and the pig
Now we
example.
have other things over there.
And the pumpkins, you colored those in afterward?
Right. Now that was done with the markers.
Okay.
It was stamped in black first and then colored in with the markers.
Okay, very good. So that's the pop up.
All right.
Now, we have this.
Right.
And what do you call
And
this?
those are called pop-outs.
These are neat.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And it usually works best with like a butterfly design or something where you're doing it on both sides. But you can use it on a design like this, but you would just cut half of the design. Because if you went all the way around, it would just drop off your
Okay.
design. So see how when you pull it out, it just gives dimension to your cards.
So basically, we're doing the same thing as the pop up, but let's say we were doing it on this card, we would just cut out half of this.
You could
and
do
then
that
it
on
would
the
pop
lower
up.
part as well.
Or
Exactly.
on the lower part. Okay, you have another example?
Yes, now here's the butterfly. Like I'm saying, this technique is especially good with the butterfly. Now this has been stamped on there, and because you have a middle that's going to stay on there like that, you can cut around this, you know, with your X-Acto knife and cut. I've already cut this so we can see it. And now you're going to pull both sides out.
Oh, I see what you mean about both sides.
Right,
Okay.
because there's a middle on there that you're not cutting, that keeps it from falling off of the card.
Oh, yeah. I suppose we could do that with
And-
any design.
Most designs. Now, if you did
Just
that
about.
with that, the dolphins there, it would look kind of strange.
Well, that's true.
You know, you
That's
just have
true.
to experiment with
Just
different
decide
things.
with your
But there's
design.
many designs you could do that with. A bird, you could do just the wing coming out. A lot of things like that.
Now we have an example over there of the piece of pottery. It's a larger
a large
one.
one.
And just pulled out the edge of it.
pull out there. And
Just a little dimension,
it
make it
gives dimension,
special.
right.
Now these cards that we're using, the outline was already on them. I want to make sure that everybody understands
Right.
that we take just a regular card like this,
Exactly. It's already got the gold outline on it, and they come in silver also.
and we've just been doing that to make these
Right.
cards. Okay, now our final one
Okay.
is
And
this. I
building
love
a
this.
little scene, taking a stamp instead of just stamping one or two on something, you're actually creating a little scene there that's humorous
Right.
in this case.
Skeletons look like they're dancing out, and this is just
Right.
one stamp.
That's just one stamp,
But we've moved
along
him
with the
around.
jumbo pottery stamp, and it looks like he's jumping up out of there.
Okay.
Now I'm going to show you some other techniques here. This is along the same line of doing your building with a little scene out of that. Let's do it upside down so that we've got green here, so we're going to make it look like the trees are down in the green area. And you stamp one,
Oh,
then go back, stamp another one.
oh, I see.
Okay, and then we'll do one more up here, like this. Then we'll take our little, this one here,
Balloons.
hot air balloons.
Oh,
And you created
yes,
that.
I like that.
And if that was a birthday card, you can just stamp happy birthday on
That's
there.
great. Well, I'm going to make my own scene over there
Okay.
with this one.
All right.
And I suppose I could have a whole herd of cows coming
Right.
across. And boy, you can't get creative when you start combining different stamps.
Right.
Okay, this is the one I want. And there, clouds. It's a cloudy
Perfect.
day for the Well,
Perfect.
this is great. I could see doing this with the kids.
Right.
Here, creating all kinds of scenes. Good. Well, we have some great ideas that you've shared with us. So why don't we review one more time all of the different techniques we can use? The light and dark, the overlap stamping, embellishing with glitter glue, coloring the stamps with brush markers, and then don't forget the pop-ups, the pop-outs, and creating a scene. And now let's move on to embossing. This adds a really elegant touch to your cards and letters. Even the most ordinary paper will look special with embossed images. Vesta, I love this embossing.
It's really exciting.
It is. Let's first make sure everyone knows what we're talking about here. You can see how the image is, it's raised and it's shiny, and this was a stamp.
That's
and
right.
you're going to show us how we're going to do this.
First of all, we need to explain the type of ink we're using.
Okay.
And we're going to use embossing ink, which is especially for embossing. In other words, if you stamp this ink on paper, it has no color. It's very wet and sticky. It's real slow drying because it needs to be slow drying for the powder.
Okay. So we have
So,
our embossing ink.
Embossing ink is what we're using here. And we're going to do this big jumbo stamp. Now, remember, we want to get plenty of ink on it.
And this is a pad that had no
This
colored ink or
This
anything
was a
like that.
dry pad, and
Dry
then
pad.
you can get the refill of embossing ink to make your own pad.
Okay.
It also comes in this size here, which is a little kit, and you would use that for your regular size stamps.
Okay.
But if for those who are going to be using jumbo stamps, it's better to buy this one because you can use little stamps on it
Right.
as well as your jumbo. Okay, so we get that inked really well. Then you stamp it on your paper. Press really hard all over. Then you put that down. And we'll stamp a little greeting on here.
Now see, we can't even hardly see what that is. That's because
Well, you can
the
see
ink
the
is
wetness.
clear. Okay.
And it takes a long time to dry, so you've got plenty of time to put this on. See
look
how
at
it's
that.
sticking to the ink? Okay, we'll make sure it gets on everything. Then you want to tap off the edges. It's important to have really clean hands when you start with embossing because you can even, it'll even stick to fingerprints if your fingers are really oily.
Okay.
Okay, then you want to shake it off, blow off any excess that might be on the background. Then there's different heat sources you can use. You can either use a hot plate like this and hold the image over that. You can use a heat gun.
Okay.
People have even done this with an iron. But it just needs to be over the heat source.
So just what?
Now you can see it starting
Oh, look
to
at
melt.
it change in the happy birthday. Isn't that fun? And what temperature do we need this to be on?
I set it on the high setting because it's quicker that
Oh,
way.
that's great. Look at that.
And you can see.
I've done one in silver here. I've already stamped it, and I've already put the powder on. How long can we leave this before we put it over the heat source?
Oh, hours.
So we could do a
Yeah.
whole series
You
of
could-
cards
right.
and then
you could stamp 20 of them.
heat them all at
and
once.
Put
huh?
all your powder on at once and then go back and do this.
That's great.
And you know it's completely finished when the whole image looks shiny. You notice it's dull before you melt it. See, you can see that. So you have just a little there at the
There
bottom,
go my paws.
and there they are.
This is wonderful. It does give it such a professional look.
It's really beautiful with it.
So these are the embossing powders and the
Right.
embossing ink. Now, we have
And you
something
want to
else show
save
us.
all this excess and put it back into the jar like that. And each jar like this will do hundreds of images with that.
Oh.
If you don't spill it and you keep putting it back in. Okay, now let's explain the embossing pen. This has really slow drying ink in this as well. So there's ways that you can embellish your cards with this.
Okay.
Okay, now let's say you want to take and stamp this little guy on here.
It's a koala bear on a skateboard.
Right. And first of all, let's go ahead and put the powder on there so that we can, since we're working on a black piece of paper, you can't see them too good.
Okay.
Okay, then we'll melt that. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our embossing pen and make it look like he's skateboarding down a hill.
Okay, so the embossing pen has the embossing ink, which we were just
Right.
using inside it.
Exactly.
So it works the same, but it's a pen. I just love
Right.
watching that
Isn't that
change.
fun?
It is.
Okay, now you take your pen and just draw on a little hill like this.
That's amazing.
Okay,
I'll believe it when I see it.
there it is. You could draw grass on there if you wanted. You could draw a little saying on there, like he's saying something.
Gosh, you could handwrite invitations in your own handwriting if you have
Exactly.
good handwriting.
And it looks, a lot of people use this for calligraphy.
Mm. Oh, so many ideas.
There's just so many
Look
things
at
you can
that.
do.
That's wonderful.
And you could go on and embellish more if you want. Like you could do little dots in the sky, and make them look like stars. You could, if that's a real work of art, you could sign your name.
Oh, I like, yeah, emboss your name on that. I
Emboss
like
your
that.
name.
Now, let's just take a look at this example because I think you're using different techniques here.
Right. Now this is called sponge embossing here. And we used, do you remember we talked about the color box inks?
Right.
And the one real advantage that they had is they were really slow drying inks, which is perfect for embossing. Because the dye base ink, if you stamp that and you set it aside and try to put powder on it, it has already dried too fast. This gives up to an hour or so before you have to put the powder on, and it'll stick to it.
So we were talking about our
So-
rainbow colors that we were using before.
Right, and
Okay.
also, you see the colors show up on here?
Right, how do you
They're
do-
very subtle on here, but you can see them.
The purple and the blue.
Right, and that is the color box inks here, which are the pigment ink. And it's so thick and sticky that it will show up on there. No other type of ink will show up on black paper other than the
Can you show us what
pigment
you're talking
ink.
about just on
Sure.
using a stamp and a
Right.
corner of that? Can we maybe use these feet?
Let's see.
Will they work
Oh yeah, sure it
for
will.
doing this?
Yes, it
So I like
will.
those, and they're a nice thick image,
Right.
so we'll
It's-
get
It's going to
plenty
be
of
very
color.
subtle.
Okay.
But when you sponge it on, it really goes on thick. So, should we use it on here? Or?
Yeah, just on the
we're
corner, I
showing.
think.
Okay. Okay, then we're going to use a clear powder.
All right.
Now, if you put the gold powder over there, you're going to end up with gold footprints. But
This is
going
clear?
to emboss, but it's going to let the color show through.
Okay, so that's
It
clear
looks
powder.
white right now.
Mhm.
Okay,
And we use
No.
the colors underneath,
all right.
and that's how we get that
It's
effect.
going to be very subtle, but
Okay. Well, sometimes we like that
Yeah.
subtlety, especially on bare
Right.
feet.
yeah, this is very,
Yeah,
very
you can
subtle.
see it.
but
Well, again, and here's a
anyway.
good example of it, basically,
Right.
but that's the technique.
This went on a little bit thicker because we were using a sponge.
Okay.
And,
Natural sponge. And did you use the embossing pen for
right,
this?
now after it's all finished, then you can go back and border it with your embossing pen. Just draw ragged edges like that. The pottery was put on there, and then these little sticks were just drawn on.
Okay.
You could draw
So
anything you wanted.
how do we do more than one color of
Okay,
embossing powder?
I'll show you that next.
Alrighty.
Okay.
Here, while you
Remember
set that
to
up.
keep putting these back in.
I want to show
Setting.
this one because this, if you can see, has some silver here and some gold here. So you've got gold and silver throughout the whole picture. And that's what Vesta is going to show us next.
Okay. Now, I hope that'll fit in there. Okay, we'll do this fish.
Okay.
Something that looks good with color. There again, we want to move it all around to get plenty of that on there. Okay.
So we've seen gold, we've seen silver, we've seen clear,
Right.
but they come in all different colors.
A lot of people ask, can you put more than one color on at once?
Mm-hmm.
And you can. You want to have little papers all ready for yourself there. Now we're going to put a little bit of green. Okay, let's set that aside right now. And we'll do a little bit of orange. And you always want it going away from you like that so it doesn't get on areas that you don't want to cover.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Use the pink next.
Okay, now we're going to turn it over.
Pink.
Oh, pink, yeah.
Just because I love that color.
Okay.
It's
put
so
that
bright.
near the
Look at
orange.
that. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a good
Oops.
one.
Okay, and what haven't we?
Blue.
The blue.
Blue looks good.
Okay. The reason why we're doing different papers is so you can put it back in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they'll mix together. Now, with the last color, you can kind of go over the whole thing, and it'll get any little areas that you missed.
Ooh, that is
Okay.
great. Okay.
Now you just heat it, and this is going to look real glossy when we get it done.
This is
I don't
wonderful.
know if we have that on
Now,
high.
could you have done just the green section, then heated it,
No.
Then put the, oh, you
Well,
can't do it
what
that
would
way.
happen is you're heating it and it's making that ink dry,
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Okay.
which might
Okay.
speed up the drying
that's
of that.
wonderful.
Now you can see a little bit of the glossy area.
This is fun. All right, I want to show
So it's
everybody all of
exciting.
these different things that you have done using these techniques. So let's just go through these, and you can tell us how you did them.
All right.
This was the stamps.
Right.
Okay.
And this is an embossing powder called White Sparkle, which looks really
great.
nice
Here,
on
I'm
there.
gonna go like
But we
this.
stamped the 2 stamps on there, then took the embossing pen, drew a line right at the base of those, and then the little stars were done with just dotting the sky,
It's great.
and then put the powder on.
This is beautiful. Look at
Okay,
this.
now this is a trifold card, and this was, you know, went all the way to the bottom. But put the stamp on there, emboss it, and then use the markers to color them in.
Oh, so
Remember
this
how
is
we
just the-
marked on the stamp?
just the
this
purple
is
and the
filling
green.
in the area afterwards, and it even has a little glitter glue on there to add sparkle.
It's beautiful.
The edge of this was done with the embossing pen to add gold to the edge of that. And then we took scissors and cut it out.
Okay, here's another similar example.
Same way with that. This was embossed in gold, and this was done with the embossing pen on the edge, colored in with markers, and then just take scissors and cut it out.
Boy, that
Gets
is
dimension.
every bit as beautiful as if we went to a store and bought
Right.
it. And some more quick examples here of just using the silver
Now
and the
that
gold.
had, yes, the same way we did the fish, where you put a little bit of one color on and then some of the other. This is sponge embossing here, which we haven't actually done yet. I'll have to show you that method.
Let's show us now.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. Okay. How about
This
if
is
we just
using
take,
a sponge.
right, we'll do this really quick.
Okay.
Or do we have any black? Maybe we'll do that on black.
Here, we could do it on the back of, here, do it on my paw.
Oh, okay. All right. Then we take a piece of paper and put it across it. Let's see, we kind of need one that's longer, but that's all right.
Okay.
We'll just put some on there. Then it's good to take some of this ink, put it on your pad, like too much on there, and
A glob
dab it.
of it.
Right.
Okay.
And then just go along and dab that on.
Okay.
Might want to just kind of intermittently put it on there. And we'll take that gold here. And there again, you could mix it. You could put gold and silver. Okay. And put it over the heat source again.
So the sponge just gives it a different kind of a look.
Right. It gives it a totally different look, and you're not using a stamp in that case. Your sponge is your stamp. Let's see how it's turning again.
Has anyone ever tried to do this over a toaster?
Yes, it gets very hot, and that
It does
works very
work?
well too. So really, any heat source you have around your house, if it's thin enough paper, you can do it over a light bulb.
Oh, I'll be darned.
So, but if you're in a hurry, the
Okay.
other works. Now you can see that
Right.
edge that was put on there.
Pretty.
Another thing too, we talked about the stationery that already had the gold around it like that. Of course, if you do something embossed in here with gold, it looks really fabulous. But another thing you can do is take a template and lay it down. If you had a template that was round or an oval or whatever, you can take your embossing pen, mark around in there, and put your own borders on cards and letters too.
I want to show this one
Okay.
because it's dimensional. How did you do that?
Okay, first it was stamped on the stationery and embossed, colored in with the markers. Then we made this on a separate piece of paper, embossed it, colored it in, and cut it out, and then glue on only the center of the flower like that, and
Boy,
it gives
that's
it
pretty.
dimension too.
And I want to show this because we don't have to
Right.
just make cards
Right,
using
you can
this
use
kind
it
of
for
thing.
anything.
Look at how pretty this is. Now you've done the same idea of cutting
Right.
out some and
Some are embossed
Gluing them
right
on top.
directly onto the mat board, and then some pieces are cut out and put on.
we don't have to use it just on paper. We have
Right.
some examples of embossing on wood also.
Exactly. A lot of people say, well, can you put it on something heavy or thicker than paper? And you can. You can emboss on wood. We have a little wooden box there that was embossed,
Now,
colored
how do you heat it then?
Then I'll show you. There's a couple of different ways. You can use a heat gun like this, which makes it very easy. You don't have to hold it over a heat source. But if you are putting it on your stove, let's say it was this, then instead of holding it this way like we did in watching it heat, then you would put it this way, and the heat doesn't have to travel through the wood.
Okay.
And the same thing with mat board. It's better to turn it the other way, and it'll
heat
much.
it on top instead of
Exactly.
underneath. Wow, these are great ideas.
Really
What a
fun,
lot
huh?
of fun this is going to be now that I know how to do this.
Right.
Thank you. And we've tried to give you lots of ideas along with these instructions. And I'll tell you what, we could go on all day. But we still want to show you fabric stamping and shrink plastic. So let's move on to the next section. In this segment, we're going to show you 3 different ways to decorate fabrics with stamps. The first method will be stamping right onto the fabric. The second will be stamping with color box inks and sealing them to the fabric with clear embossing powder. The third method will be stamping designs on paper with fabric transfer ink and then ironing them onto the fabric. So let's first start with the basics.
Okay. Now, when you're working on fabric, you want to wash them first. Like if it's a t-shirt, you want to wash the sizing out of it.
Okay.
Even if you were working on like this or this, you want to wash it first to get all the sizing out of it.
Any kind of fabric, okay.
And then the next thing, this is permanent ink, so we can't make any mistakes. Okay? Okay, so remember how we said always practice on paper first. You always want to practice on paper. Now, after you ink this, now there again we're working with a jumbo stamp on a jumbo pad. You can buy these where they're empty and then put your fabric ink on it. And now we're going to make sure it's well inked. And see how a little bit on there? So you would want to make sure when you're getting ready to do it on here that it has plenty of ink on it.
On the whole thing.
Okay. Now, before we do that, I've made some paper cutouts of these where I have stamped onto the fabric, onto the paper, and then cut them out because you may want to decide where you want to put your design first.
Okay.
Okay, we're doing this.
Now, do we need to put something underneath or
Yes,
inside
that's
of our
another thing
shirt?
too. I have a piece of plastic in here, but you can put paper, whatever. Most people are used to using a shirt board.
Right, that we can buy in the store.
Right. We don't want to use that when we're stamping onto the fabric.
Okay.
And the reason for that is it's cardboard and it's not really a flat surface again. The cardboard has little grooves in it. So when you're stamping it, you may miss areas.
Okay.
So
this will make sure we have a hard surface.
We want to work on a flat surface,
All right,
smooth
and
surface.
this is where we want our
so
design.
let's say
Looks
we're
good.
going to do that with it. This gives you an idea. If you don't like it, you haven't already stamped on your shirt.
Okay.
So, okay. Now, the next thing.
Make sure we get all that ink on there.
Right. You can leave the papers there if you don't remember where you were putting it. You could do that too. But, okay. Let's try to get this well inked. And we're going to stamp on one. And you want to work quickly with this ink because if you leave it, if you just stand there with this, this will start to dry. It's very fast drying.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
In a way, I suppose that's good because then if we're
Yeah.
working, we don't have to worry about
Right,
it
you can start
smudging.
You can immediately begin to paint on it.
Okay.
Okay, let's stamp another one. Okay.
Good.
Now these light areas we're going to be covering with paint, so it doesn't really matter.
We have our basic idea of what the
Right.
stamp looks like, where it goes.
Right. Okay. Now we'll stamp another one. Okay. Now we've got our pattern on there. Okay. Now we're going to start with the paint and cover up these areas.
This is regular fabric paint.
Yes.
Is this
And
dimensional paint that we're
this
using?
is dimensional.
Okay.
This is silver pearl that we're outlining this with. And we're going to go over all the black areas of the shell.
So basically our stamp is like a guide for us.
Exactly.
As if we had traced in a picture beforehand.
That's right.
And now we just have to cover
Now
it in.
you're doing that, and you fill in all the areas of black with this.
Okay.
Okay. Now we can pull that off.
And show our next one. Here we can see that you've covered in all of the
Right,
areas
right.
with our dimensional paint.
Exactly. Now we're going to take, this is a paint that's especially for dark fabrics that we're going to put on next. Then we're going to go back in these areas and just dab on some color in there.
And now we have it on a shirt board. It's okay when we're
Right.
painting, just like painting as we're probably used to doing anyway,
Right,
painting a shirt.
exactly.
So the plastic or the paper was just for our stamping step.
Just for the stamping stage, because you always want to work on a smooth, flat surface.
I like that idea of using the stamps as our outline or our design because there's so many adorable stamps out there. And if I were going to go and try to just freehand it with the paint or a pencil or something, there's no
right.
way I could get
This way,
quick
anybody
picture
can
like
be
that.
an artist.
Yeah.
You pick out any stamp you want.
Great.
And you can make a matching birthday card if you're making a shirt for somebody. Emboss them a card with the same stamp
Oh,
and give them as a set.
yeah, I like that. Now, here, let's show everyone our finished
Okay.
shirt. And there it is, very simple. We can see how
Right.
quickly
and see,
we
we
can
just
do that.
embellish this with doing that. You can go on and
We could put some glitter in here,
you
glitter
could
paint.
put
or-
rhinestones on there. You
Gosh.
can spray it with webbing spray.
All right.
A lot of different things.
Well, let's take a look at some of the other ideas that you have here.
Okay.
We'll pull this
You don't
off.
have to work on only T-shirts. You could do the pot holders, napkins. This is a telephone book. With all the recycling, people are using their own bags to go in and shop with those, so you can personalize those.
And on the picture frame there, that was a stamp that you put on. And again, we should just keep in mind that the stamp is a guide for us to then use the paint on top of that.
Right,
And they
right.
turn out so nice. And this color in here, that's done with a webbing paint.
Right, it
spray.
was sprayed on.
Boy,
And
that
another
adds
thing we
something.
should go over real quickly too is we use black ink on this, and most light colored fabrics you can use the black. If you want to use, the black ink, and if you want to use stampings on dark colored shirts like black or navy blue, then you would use white fabric ink for that.
And it would be the same process.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then you need permanent cleaner, permanent ink cleaner to take the ink off of the stamp.
And what is this ink called again?
It's permanent fabric ink.
Okay, well, this is obviously quick and easy. Let's go through the basics one more time. Always wash and dry your fabric first. Work on a smooth, flat surface. Put a layer of paper under the fabric and inside the shirts to prevent bleed through. Do not use cardboard inserts while you're stamping. You can use that cardboard shirt form later when you're painting. Test the stamp on the paper first to be sure that the stamp is properly inked. Check the manufacturer's instructions for special consideration if they're cotton or synthetic. Wash in cool or warm water. Avoid hot wash. Do not use bleach or detergents with bleach.